Okay, real quick. So I've been seeing a lot of left-wing media lately that is trying to rehabilitate the left's image with the common voter, mainly trying to clean up that image by focusing on some, shall we say, less popular left-wing phrases like defund the police. So real quick, before we go anywhere, let's just establish something, because this is primarily motivated by Trump's victory a couple weeks ago. The Harris campaign did not campaign on a platform of defund the police. They never uttered that phrase, not once. They were pretty ardently pro-cop. They even referred to Kamala as America's top cop. So the idea that an election loss should be tossed up to that phrase, which was really only circulating 4 years ago when Biden won, is kind of dubious. But let's look at the phrase itself, because I agree that the phrase is misleading and confusing to people who have never heard it and don't know what they're talking about. So to understand what defund the police means, you have to understand the underlying issues that generated that phrase. So if you look at research done across multiple countries over the last 5 decades, you see a pretty clear trend. And that is that anti-poverty measures have a sizable impact on crime. And that as poverty decreases, so does crime. So one of the key takeaways here is that if you want cities with less crime, if you want safer cities, you need cities with less poverty. And so that means focusing on things like universal housing, things like food benefits, things like universal health care, UBI, if you can do it. All of these things have a decidedly downward impact on the amount of crime in a community. Okay, so that's one prong of the issue. But now we need to look at the second. And the second is that the police force sometimes, not always, but sometimes has the opposite effect. That by militarizing police, you are actually making communities less safe, not more. So there's a variety of reasons for this. One of them is that a lot of police officers, again, not all, but a lot, do have racist sentiments and are prone to targeting people of color. Another is that it kind of goes back to the if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail bit of wisdom. So if you train a police force to basically operate like an occupying army, then they inevitably see the citizens they are meant to protect as the enemy. And one of the things that happens that a lot of ex-cops have talked about is the fact that police in their training are literally traumatized by being forced to watch, the grisly death of other police officers. Now, again, that is a complex issue because to an extent the danger is real. But while there is a real component to that danger, it often gets exaggerated in the minds of officers because of this trauma. And they go into the field with, almost a kind of paranoia. And this makes them more prone to using too much force as opposed to trying to minimize the amount of force used. So these are all the issues involved with defund the police. And what that slogan is meant to convey is the idea that we should take money out of police budgets, take it away from giving them assault rifles, bombs. Yes, sometimes they do. There was a big thing in 2016 where where a police force in, I believe it was Texas, but forgive me if I'm wrong, it's been a long time. They literally they strapped bombs to a robot, they sent the robot into a parking garage, and they blew up the sniper that they were trying to get at. Now, the idea behind defund the police is less money for guns, less money for bombs, more money for public housing, more money for mental health resources, more money for things that have a proven track record of reducing the amount of crime in a community. Because, hey, when you reduce the amount of crime in a community, not only do you make the lives of ordinary citizens safer, you actually make it safer for police officers as well. But and there's someone who will take almost any position, but the majority of people who were saying defund the police were not saying let's have no cops, let's have absolutely nothing in the form of civic security. That was not an argument that was being made, not in any high degree. I mean, there's somebody who will take any position, no matter how absurd, but that was not what the vast majority of people were saying. Okay. The problem is that the average citizen who is not well versed in these issues, who does not understand that all of the underlying factors, will hear a phrase like defund the police, and they will think it means reduce police budgets to zero and have no more cops. And yes, the phrase is confusing. We could do the same thing with similar phrases. We could talk about how phrases like white privilege can be confusing. I'm not going to get into that now because I think the defund point illustrated it sufficiently. But yes, a lot of people who do not have the research background to understand what is being meant when these phrases are used can be confused by them. And yes, that is a messaging issue for the left. Here's the problem. The idea that the left is somehow going to court voters by winning the slogan war is failed from the get-go. Because you cannot reduce. I mean, look how much time I just spent explaining what defund the police means. It took 5 minutes in this now 8-minute video. You cannot reduce a complex issue like that to a one-sentence slogan. Now, the right doesn't have this issue. It doesn't have this issue because the right has no obligation to actually be truthful in any of the slogans that it presents. I mean, they had these ads saying Kamala is for sex changes for prisoners, and completely ignoring the fact that gender-affirming care for inmates was available under the Trump administration. They lie. They have no obligation to present the truth. And therefore, when all you need is a simplistic lie, it's very easy to create a slogan like Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you. We're not going to win in the slogan war. Like, unfortunately, the battlefield is just too stacked against us. So we shouldn't be putting effort into that in any event. What we should be doing is supporting things like public education. If you're a liberal and you want to win elections, you need to back and support public education. You need to support other forms of public infrastructure too, but especially in this case, public education, because public education, when done correctly, with an emphasis on true knowledge, with an emphasis on the scientific consensus, with an emphasis on presenting facts that are true to the best of our ability to uncover them, actually arms voters with protection against that kind of disinformation. There's a reason why Republicans and conservatives in Canada and conservatives in the UK have a sustained and protracted war against public education because they realize that their bullshit is not going to be appealing to anybody who has a background in the subject matter, who actually knows what they're talking about. And that's, one of the big prongs in their war. And that's why they call anything that explains the actual facts, from the truth about slavery to the truth about climate change, anything that explains the actual facts gets labeled by them as indoctrination, because that's the point. They want to indoctrinate you with ignorance. They don't want you to know that the best way to reduce crime in a community is to reduce poverty, because then you are going to vote against their interests. They don't want you to know about the strong positive effects of anti-poverty measures. They want you to believe in their orthodoxy of, how did Reagan put it? Government is not the solution. Government is the problem. That's what they want you to believe. Because if you believe that, you leave the door open for them to exert more control. So, to fellow lefties out there who are talking about the slogan war and coming up with better slogans, my advice to you is don't bother, because you're not going to be able to do it, because it's not physically possible. This is not a problem caused by a lack of creativity on our part. This is a problem caused by the fact that you cannot reduce complex issues to a pithy slogan. What you need to focus on instead is the war for public education. And that's our thought for the day. Thank you so much. Have a great day.